Welcome to the first episode of Chide Study Press podcasts. Today we'll be introducing Chinamans Well. So this is one of many myths that range around Chinese-Australian history, so it's a particular aspect of the history. Chinamans Well is in South Australia. Remarkably, it is in fact signposted as having been built by Chinese, despite the fact that there is absolutely no evidence of that. So the South Australian Tourist Board has kind of stumbled upon a bit of a myth, believed it, and put a lot of effort into signposting it for tourists. And of course the tourists go along, look at these signs and are being completely misled. So we'll discuss a little bit about Chinamans Well in this podcast. As usual, how AI people will be doing that for me. Just to remember, if you want to learn more about Chinamans Well, this is a publisher's podcast. So this is contained in a book called Every Requisite for a Campaign Upon the Goldfields. So it gives the history of the road walk, the famous walk that Chinese gold seekers did from South Australia into Victoria in order to avoid the Victorian government's poll tax. So that's quite interesting, and Chinamans Well is part of that history. So get on the Chide Study Press if you want to learn more. But in the meantime, listen to this taster of some of the many myths associated with Chinese Australian history in general and the robe walk in particular. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? This time we're hopping over to Australia. We've gotten a ton of requests to dig into Chinamans Well.
Ah, yes. Intriguing, isn't it? A stone well out on the Coorong.
And the name, right. I mean, you've been looking into early Chinese migration to Australia, the gold rush, all that. And you want to know, did Chinese workers actually build this thing?
Right. It's a popular theory for sure,
Yeah.
especially with the Wells location and, well, the whole gold rush timeline. But as you've been finding this story, it might be a bit more complex than that.
Yeah, those sources you sent, they get into some pretty wild details.
Yeah.
So walk me through it. What's the first clue that maybe, just maybe, Chinamans Well isn't the whole picture?
Well, the well itself, it's unique. You mentioned the shape, kind of like a beehive, and that stone cap on top.
Yeah, super distinctive.
Exactly. And that's where things get interesting. See, that kind of construction, that particular style, it doesn't really line up with what we know about Chinese wells, especially not from the mid-19th century.
So if not Chinese gold seekers, then who built it? And why call it Chinamans Well?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's almost like circular myth-making. The name gets stuck, and then suddenly every story, every explanation has to fit around that name, even if the evidence doesn't really back it up.
We've jumped to the ending of the mystery novel without reading the middle chapters.
Precisely. And that's why we've got to slow down, rewind a bit, and look at the timeline. What do we actually know about this well, and when did we learn it?
Let's roll back the clock then. Where does this story actually begin? Okay, so we're thinking like historians here, not jumping to conclusions. Where do we even start with this well?
Well, the cool thing is those sources you sent, they actually lay out a pretty good timeline. We just have to go back a bit further, back to the 1840s.
Even before the big gold rush, right?
Exactly. Before the rush really kicked off, European explorers, settlers, they were already making their way through the Coorong. And guess what they started mentioning?
Wells.
Wells. So the whole idea of wells in that area, it wasn't new, even before all those gold seekers showed up.
Interesting. So there were already wells around. Makes you think about how important water sources were in that environment, huh?
Absolutely essential.
Okay, but what about this well? The one we're calling Chinamans Well.
Yeah.
When does that name actually appear?
So let's fast forward a bit, right into the thick of the gold rush. The 1850s, that's when we start seeing the name Chinamans Wells pop up in some records.
Wells, plural.
Yep, plural.
Interesting. Does it, specify which well? Any description that we could connect to the one with that unique design?
See, that's the thing. Those early mentions, they don't actually describe the well in any detail. Not enough to say, yep, that's definitely the one. No beehive shape, no fancy stone cap. Just, wells being used by folks in the area.
Okay, so we've got wells before the Chinese gold rush, then the name Chinamans Wells during the rush, but no solid link to our mystery well. What happens next?
For a while, not much. There are records of repairs being done to wells in the late 1800s. Maintenance, But again, nothing about those unique features.
It's like the well went into hiding. When does it actually get described in a way we'd recognize?
get this, it takes decades. The first time we get a clear description that matches the Chinaman's Well we're talking about, the beehive shape, the capstone, all that, the 1930s.
The 1930s. That's a huge gap.
Yeah.
Seems like something that unusual would have been mentioned sooner.
Right. And even then, even in those 1930s descriptions, there's no mention of Chinese builders. People definitely noticed its unique design, but the origin story, total mystery.
Okay, so we're in the 1930s. The well's finally getting some recognition. Is this when the Chinese gold seeker idea takes hold?
Not quite. We've got to fast forward again, this time to the 1960s.
The 1960s. What happened then?
That's when this story about Chinese builders really gains traction.
Why then? Almost a century after the gold rush. What sparked that connection?
It seems to come from a story. A missionary's daughter, she was around back then, and she said the well's design, it looked Chinese to her. That's what got the ball rolling.
But we already talked about how experts haven't found any wells quite like it in China from that time period.
Exactly. Which just goes to show how powerful a good story can be. It sounded right, fit the time period, and boom, a narrative is born.
Chinese gold seekers, a remote well in Australia. Yeah, I can see the appeal.
Right. It's a great story. But as we're finding out, a good story and historical accuracy, not always the same thing.
So if the Chinese gold seeker theory isn't looking so strong, what else could explain this well? Who are our other suspects? It's like we've been piecing together this puzzle, and now we're trying to figure out what image is on the box. If it's not the Chinese gold seekers, then what else could explain this well?
Well, that's where those other theories you found come in. It's like we tried a puzzle piece, didn't quite fit, so now we got to try some others.
Right. Okay, so one of the sources mentioned this guy, Joseph Darwin, a shipping agent, worked in the area. He was looking for a stonemason to help build a mill, if I remember correctly.
Ah, yes, and get this, there was something about the well's capstone, how it was like carved with similar techniques they used for millstones. Little detail, but could be important.
So instead of some big symbolic project, maybe this well was more practical. Darwin needs a well for his house or maybe some business venture. Hires a stonemason who just happens to be really, really good at his job.
Exactly. It's a much simpler explanation, right? Less exciting, maybe, but that's how history often works. Every day needs leading to something extraordinary.
And it just shows how much those little details matter. The stonemason, the mill, all those clues adding up.
Absolutely. And speaking of clues, there was something else you found. Something about the bigger picture in the Kurong back then, in the 1860s.
Yeah, like shipping and navigation were becoming a big deal there.
Right, so maybe this, well, it wasn't meant to be some standalone thing. Maybe it was part of something bigger, a whole plan to really establish a presence in the area.
And that makes you think about the lack of descriptions before the 1930s, doesn't it? What if it's even older than we thought?
Older than those earliest accounts from Europeans in the 1840s.
Yeah. What if the name Chinamans Well came later?
It's possible, isn't it? Makes you wonder how we name things, how those names stick, and how the stories change over time.
So, after all this digging, all this diving into Chinamans Well, what have we learned? Aside from the fact that this well has a really interesting history.
It reminds us to keep asking questions, to be curious, but also a little bit skeptical. We see how easily these myths can pop up, how a name can completely shape our understanding of something.
History is not set in stone, is it?
Not at all. It's always evolving, always new things to discover, new ways to look at old stories.
So as you keep researching, keep this in mind. Question everything, dig a little deeper, and be open to new possibilities. You never know what you might find. And hey, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.
Well, that was a great little discussion of Chinamans Well. One mistake how AI people made is perhaps that they didn't mention that Chinamans Well was actually on the map in 1854. There was something there that was referred to as Chinamans Well, and this is, of course, the beginning of the myth. There's no description, as I said, no hint that it was this beehived and stone-capped well that's there today, but certainly in the area there were wells, numerous wells, and there was some association with Chinaman. And as I say, if you read the book, Every Requisite for a Campaign Upon the Goldfields, or listen to future podcasts where, in fact, I will be discussing that whole history a little bit more, you'll learn more about these aspects of the history. In the meantime, perhaps go to Child Study Press website, or, I say, hopefully enjoy future podcasts. Thank you very much for your listening.